Lakers fans, what just shifted around Rui Hachimura in Los Angeles feels less like a routine rotation tweak and more like one of those fault line moments where a front office quietly decides who is truly part of the future and who might be living on borrowed time. Welcome back to Lakers News Fan Report, the channel where you get updated news and honest, detailed analysis about our Lakers every single day. From a fan who bleeds purple and gold, but isn't afraid to talk about the tough decisions this franchise has to make. Today I'm going to walk you through why a player who is putting up the best numbers of his career is, at the same time, right in the middle of stay or go conversations. What the Luka Doncic J.J. Redick era really wants from its forwards, what the cap sheet is screaming behind the scenes, and how we got to the point where people are seriously asking if Rui is going to be pushed out of this project sooner than anyone expected. Let's start with the basic contradiction, because that's where the story gets crazy. If you look only at the box score, Rui is doing exactly what we beg him to do. He is scoring efficiently. He is spacing the floor. He is punishing smaller defenders, and he is not hijacking the offense. We're talking about a guy giving you around 16 points per night, well above 55% from the field, over 50% from three, and doing it without demanding 20 shots a game. On paper, that's the dream forward next to a heliocentric superstar like Luka, big enough to guard size, skilled enough to hit open looks, calm enough to survive playoff pressure. Redick came out after that win over the Hornets and basically said, "That stretch from Rui on defense is as good as we've seen from him." And Luka doubled down with praise, pointing out that nobody talks about how important Rui is to some of these wins. So, if the star player and the head coach are throwing roses at you after a road win, why the hell are we even talking about the possibility of the Lakers walking away from him? To really understand this, you have to rewind a little bit and look at Rui's arc in LA. He arrived from Washington as a talented but inconsistent scorer, a guy who flashed mid-range touch, soft hands around the rim, and the physical profile every team wants at the forward spot, but who had never quite put it together for a full season. The first months with the Lakers were about survival, learning the schemes on the fly, figuring out where to be next to LeBron and AD, trying to prove he belonged on a team that was suddenly chasing playoff wins instead of lottery odds. Then came that stretch where his three-point shot started to stabilize. One season at 42% from deep, the next year over 41% again, and now he's flirting with mid-50s from behind the arc on good volume. That's not random. That's the product of hours finding a routine, building chemistry with ball handlers who trust him enough to hit him in rhythm. He went from maybe he can shoot to you cannot leave this guy wide open in the corner. During the off seasons, his name always popped up whenever insiders talked about the Lakers poking around for another wing. There was that framework involving a bigger name at the forward spot where the other team reportedly asked for Rui, a young guard and a first-round pick. Those talks cool because the price in draft capital was too steep. But the important detail for us is this: Rui was in the middle of those discussions, not as a throw-in, not as a salary dump, but as a real piece other teams wanted. That tells you two things at once. The league respects his game, and the Lakers are willing to at least listen when his name comes up. From the front office side, the decision-making tree starts with the contract. Rui is in the final year of a 3-year deal that pays him starter money, something in the low 50s total, signed in a very different version of this franchise. Back then, the team was still orbiting around LeBron as the central sun, with Anthony Davis as co-star and a rotating cast of shooters and wings trying to keep the spacing alive. Rui was brought back as that big wing who could feast on second units, punish switches, and give you that 6'8" inches scoring punch that the roster desperately lacked. The bet was simple. His shooting growth was real. The defense would follow enough, and the money would look fine as the cap kept rising. But the ground has shifted. Luka is now the offensive engine. J.J. Redick is implementing a more modern, movement-based system. LeBron is no longer the guaranteed every-night focal point. And suddenly, every dollar on the books has to be reevaluated through a new lens. Does this piece perfectly fit what Luka needs for the next 5 years? On top of that, the Lakers have already flirted with the idea of using Rui as a trade chip. We all saw the reports. His name in framework, his salary-making deals for another forward actually legal under the CBA. His name tied to potential moves for bigger wings who defend at a higher level. There was talk about packages involving Rui and draft capital that would have shipped him out if another team had blinked. Some reports even had other front offices pushing for Dalton Neck to be attached to Rui in order to let go of a veteran starter. And that's exactly where the Lakers slowed down and said, wait, that's too much. Those talks didn't land, either because the price in picks was too high or because LA didn't love the return enough to actually pull the trigger. But once a front office has imagined you as matching salary and not just core piece, that bell is hard to unring. Even when you produce, even when you play well. Inside the building, you are now two things at once, a helpful player and a potential door to a different roster construction. Then comes the identity piece, and this is where J.J. Redick and Luka's voices matter. Redick has been very transparent about what he wants: defensive connectivity, quick decisions, and lineups where everyone can guard their own yard. Luka, on his side, can carry a giant load on offense, but he needs guys around him who won't leak points on the other end, because that is how you keep him fresh and locked in across an 82-game grind and multiple playoff rounds. Rui has always been a streaky defender. When he's locked in, you see possessions where he slides, contests, walls off drives. When he's not, you see him lose track off ball, get beat to the glass, and end up being the guy fans point to when a big run happens. The coaching staff knows this, opponents know, and front offices absolutely know this. It's the exact type of profile that scares you when you're trying to build a top 5 defense around a superstar who isn't a stopper at the point of attack himself. Another layer here is role clarity. Rui's life looks very different depending on who is on the floor with him. When LeBron is out and he can stay at the 4 defensively, guarding more traditional forwards, his weaknesses are easier to hide. He can body up, contest without chasing little guards around screens, and live more in the paint on the glass. When LeBron plays and Rui is bumped over to the 3, suddenly he has to chase quicker wings, fight around more actions, read more complex off-ball stuff. For a front office, that's a big question. If we know the ideal version of Rui is a 4, and we also know the ideal version of LeBron at this stage is more of a point forward who needs size and defense next to him, how many minutes can we actually live with Wilt without creating matchup problems? That's not a hate on Rui. It's just roster geometry. So how does that turn into whispers about the team moving on from him? It starts with the math. If you commit big money to Luka, you're already living in the luxury tax world. If you want to keep real defensive size around him, you have to pay centers and versatile wings. If you still have LeBron on the books, even in a reduced role, that's another huge number. Very quickly, you reach the point where you can't just keep paying everybody solid starter money and hope the bill disappears. Somebody has to be the piece you cash in to rebalance the cap sheet. Rui, as a good player on a medium bid contract, becomes exactly that type of piece. Not because he's bad, precisely because he's good enough that other teams will take him, and the money makes trade math easy. Now, let's talk about the rumor that has been growing legs. The idea that the Lakers quietly have already decided that this is Rui's last ride in purple and gold unless something dramatic changes. When people say he's going to be cut loose, they don't mean the team will literally waive him tomorrow for nothing. What fired from the Lakers project? Looks like in reality is more subtle. It might be the front office holding his bird rights but refusing to go into a bidding war next summer, essentially telling him, if someone comes over the top with a big offer, we're not matching. It might be dangling him at the deadline as the main salary in a package to bring back a younger, more defensive-minded forward who fits Luka's prime a little better. It might be deciding, internally, that he's a bridge starter, not the long-term forward, and already rerouting the future around a different archetype. All of that can be true while the public message stays positive, while the coach praises his effort, while the star appreciates his scoring punch. This is where the contrast between media quotes and boardroom conversations matters. After games, Redick and Luka are doing what leaders should do. They're rewarding a guy for answering the bell. They watched Rui torch the Hornets, hit all his threes, buckled down in a key third-quarter stretch, and they gave him public credit. That's good culture. But upstairs, the conversation is colder. Can we afford him on his next deal? Can we win at the highest level if our starting forward is still inconsistent on the glass and on switches? Is there a world where we flip him while his value is high and get someone whose strengths are exactly where his weaknesses are? Those are the questions that turn productive, likable players into trade candidates. And remember, the league is watching these box scores too. Every time Rui puts up a 20-piece on crazy efficiency, another front office executive adds a little underline next to his name. The draft and development angle only adds more pressure. The Lakers didn't bring in young forwards like Dalton Neck just to sit and watch forever. The more those kids show they can play, the more pressure there is on the front office to open a lane for them. If Neck proves he can be a real rotation piece on the wing on a rookie deal, that's a huge swing factor. Cheaper production at the same position always makes the expensive veteran more expendable, even if the veteran is better right. That's the cold logic of roster building in a cap league. So when we talk about Rui's future, we're not just talking about his stats. We're talking about the chain reaction his minutes and his contract trigger up and down the depth chart. Now, I'm not here to sell you panic. There is also a very real, very logical path where the Lakers simply decide that continuity has value, that Rui is a proven high-level role player next to Luka, and that his next contract can be structured in a way that doesn't kill flexibility. His age lines up with Luka's. His three-point growth over the last 3 seasons is not a fluke. He has shown he can score in the playoffs. The locker room seems to genuinely like him. In that version of the future, Rui being demoted from this roster doesn't happen. Instead, he evolves into a stable starter or sixth man whose role is clear and whose weaknesses are protected by better defensive infrastructure around him. If the front office doesn't get the kind of trade offer they want, if the market for his next deal ends up being more reasonable than people expect, the easiest move might actually be to keep him. But the reason we're even having this conversation tonight is simple. The organization is standing at a crossroad where it has to define what the Luka-era Lakers really are. Are they a team that tries to patch around the edges every year, or a team that makes one or two big, painful decisions to build a perfect ecosystem around their superstar? If it's the second option, then someone like Rui is exactly the type of player who ends up sacrificed. You don't usually get to keep every decent starter when you're chasing the highest ceiling. In a league with a hard second apron and brutal tax penalties, the Rui might be done here rumor is really a shorthand for a bigger question. How ruthless are the Lakers willing to be in this build? So here's my read, as directly as I can put it. Right now, Rui Hachimura is playing well enough that he is absolutely helping this team win games and stabilizing lineups that used to crumble. At the same time, the combination of his contract status, his defensive question marks, and the roster's long-term needs makes him one of the most likely names to be on the table if the Lakers decide to make a serious trade or if a bidding war breaks out in free agency. In other words, his place in the rotation is safe today, but his place in the multi-year plan is not guaranteed at all. If the front office finds the right upgrade on the wing, I believe they will seriously consider firing Rui from this version of the Lakers, not by cutting him outright, but by moving on when the business and basketball realities line up. Now I want to hear from you. If you were running this team, what would you do with Rui? Would you push for an extension at a reasonable number and lock in his shooting and size around Luka for the next 3 or 4 years? Would you quietly shop him, trying to sell high while the percentages are through the roof and the narrative is positive? Or would you ride this season out, see how he holds up in the playoffs again, and only then decide if he's truly part of the Luka Reddick core or just a stop along the way? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this is not a black and white topic, and I know Lakers Nation is split between those who have fallen in love with this new version of Rui and those who still see him as the first contract you move when it's time for a blockbuster. To close this video in one clear line, the main story right now isn't that Rui Hachimura has already been pushed out the door, but that he's living in that dangerous space where a player can be playing the best basketball of his life and still be one front office decision away from being removed from the Lakers' long-term blueprint. His future in Los Angeles will be a test of how aggressively this franchise is willing to shape the perfect roster around Luka Doncic. If you want to keep getting breakdowns like this, with context, numbers, and that insider-style read on where the team is really heading, make sure you're subscribed here to Lakers News Fan Report. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any updates. And hit that like button if this helped you see the Rui situation a little more clearly. I'll be here after every major rumor and big game, talking Lakers with you like we're at the bar after Staples. And as always, Let's see where this front office takes us next.